cold got into her bones somewhere around the second kilometer, and after that she stopped feeling her feet entirely. Elara kept moving anyway. The girl strapped to her back had gone quiet 20 minutes ago, and quiet was worse than crying. Quiet meant the fever had climbed past the point where the body had energy left to protest. She could feel the heat of it through her own coat, a radiant, awful warmth pressing against her spine, the kind that had nothing to do with comfort and everything to do with things burning that were not meant to burn. The Greywood border was not a wall. It was a river, ashen, narrow and black, and moving fast enough in March that crossing it meant choosing between the footbridge 3 kilometers east, which would be patrolled, and the shallows at the Oxbow Bend, which would be cold enough to stop a heart. She had memorized the river 2 years ago, not because she had planned this, but because she was the kind of person who memorized exits. 6 years of living in a place that did not want you made that instinct automatic. She chose the shallows. Water came up to her thighs. She gasped and kept walking. Ola Orbak made no sound at all. Ola was 4 years old. She was not Ilara's child. She was the daughter of Aldrich Voss, the Alpha of Stonecroft Pack, or she had been before Aldrich's younger brother Croft had arranged for Aldrich to have a hunting accident 2 months ago, before Croft had begun systematically replacing the Pack Council with his own people, before Elara, who had been the Pack's junior archivist for 6 years, had come into the records room late one Thursday night and found Croft's physician, a flat-eyed man named Doyle, slipping something into the supplement powder that was added to the children's meals. She had stood in the doorway for 3 full seconds. Doyle had not seen her. She had gone back to her quarters, sat on the edge of her bed, and thought about the 47 things she did not have. A wolf. Her shift had never come. She was 26 and the window had long since closed, and the Pack had decided what that meant about her worth. An ally, a weapon, a plan. She thought about the one thing she did know, which was that Ola had not eaten the supplemented meal that morning, because Elara had switched the serving herself, on instinct, on a bad feeling she had not been able to name until now. She started packing at midnight. The river was behind her, but she dragged herself up the east bank and stood dripping in Greywood territory and tried to remember how to breathe. Ola shifted against her back. Too warm. The fever had started 3 days ago, before Elara had understood what Doyle was putting in the food. Some of it had gotten through, then in smaller doses, and the child's body was fighting something it did not have a name for. Greywood's healer was a woman named Asha, who had trained at the old academy on the coast before the council disbanded it. Elara had read about Asha in a treaty document 2 years ago. She had memorized that too. The forest on the Greywood side was different, denser. The trees older, the undergrowth lower, the smell of the soil richer with pine and mineral cold, and something underneath all of it that she could not identify. Electric, alive the way the air felt before a storm broke. It was 3 kilometers into Greywood territory, soaking wet, running a slight fever of her own from the river crossing, carrying a sick child, and she had no pack bond, no wolf, no standing, and absolutely no right to be here. She kept walking. The checkpoint appeared through the trees, a low stone building with a covered porch and 2 lanterns burning on the posts, a Greywood sigil above the door. 3 wolves in patrol gear. She could see them through the gap in the trees, and she stood at the tree line for a moment and let herself think about what she was walking into. Then Ola made a sound, thin, reedy. A sound that was trying to be a breath and was not quite getting there. Elara walked out of the trees. The reaction was immediate. The nearest patrol wolf, tall, a woman with close-cropped hair and the particular stillness of someone trained to assess threats, had a hand on her weapon before Elara had cleared the tree line. The other 2 moved to flank. Standard. Smart, Elara said, and her voice came out steadier than she deserved. I'm not armed. I'm not a threat. She's 4 years old and she's been poisoned and I need your healer. The tall wolf, her name patch read K, but Strand, did not lower her hand, but she did not draw either. Her eyes moved to the child on Elara's back, to the fever-flushed face visible over Elara's shoulder, to the way the small fingers were curled against the back of Elara's neck with a grip that had been weakening for the last hour. "You crossed the ash fen," Strand said, "through the oxbow shallows, yes, in March." She couldn't wait for better weather. A beat. Strand's jaw moved. Behind her, one of the other wolves had already moved to the door of the checkpoint. Elara could hear a radio crackling. "She's Croft Voss's niece," Elara said, because she had decided on the walk through the forest that honesty was the only play she had left. "Orla Voss, Aldrich's daughter. Croft's physician has been dosing the children's food. I don't know what with, I don't have the resources to identify it, but I know Asha can. If she doesn't get counter-treatment in the next several hours, I don't know what happens to her." The silence lasted 4 seconds, she counted. "Get inside," Strand said. The checkpoint was warm. Wood stove, 2 folding chairs, a counter with a kettle, and a first aid kit. Elara let Strand help her lower Orla from her back, and she felt the absence of the child's weight like losing a limb she hadn't known she was depending on. Orla was placed on the examination table, a fold-out surface that the third wolf, a young man who couldn't have been more than 20, produced from somewhere with the quiet efficiency of someone who had done this before. Orla opened her eyes. They were her father's eyes, Elara had always thought. Dark amber, very direct for a 4-year-old. She looked at the ceiling of the checkpoint, and then at Elara with an expression that said clearly and without words, "I don't like this place. Where are we?" "It's all right," Elara said. The lie tasted like salt water. "We're going somewhere that can help you." "The radio call went up," the young wolf said quietly to Strand. "Main house responding. Asha is being contacted." A pause, but the Alpha received the transmission. Strand's expression shifted. Not fear, something more complicated than fear. "He heard Voss," she said. It was not a question. He was already in the east quadrant. He's 7 minutes out. Elara sat down on the folding chair because her legs had made the decision for her. She had crossed the river. She had made it to the checkpoint. She had said everything she needed to say. Greywood Alpha was 7 minutes away, and she was a wolfless woman from an enemy pack carrying that pack's exiled heir into foreign territory in the middle of the night, and she had absolutely nothing left to negotiate with except the truth, and the truth was that she had done this for a child who had nobody else. She put her hand over Orla's forehead, still burning. "Stay with me," she said quietly. Orla turned her head and looked at her with those amber eyes, and said very precisely, "You're wet. I know you smell like a river. I know that too, Ellie." It was the name Orla used, not Elara, but never the whole thing. She had decided at age 2 that it was too long, and she had never revised that opinion. "Are we safe?" Elara had been trying not to answer that question for 6 hours. "You're going to be," she said, "but I know for certain." The door opened without a knock. The cold that came in was not the cold of the March night. It was something older. A drop in pressure, the way a room feels when something very large and very aware enters it, and the air has to rearrange itself to accommodate. The lanterns on the porch didn't flicker, but somehow the light inside felt different, redistributed. He was not what the stories described. Stories. Whispered through Stonecroft's pack house the way you whispered about lightning, something powerful and indifferent and capable of destruction without malice, had described the Greywood Alpha as brutal, cold. A man who had fought 3 border challenges in his first year of leadership and won all of them before the challengers finished issuing their terms. Cale Ashmore stepped into the checkpoint, and Elara's first thought was not fear. Her first thought was that he looked tired. He was tall, yes, wide through the shoulders in a way that suggested the frame had been built for something larger than a human body. Dark hair cut short, one temple showing a streak of silver that didn't belong on a face that couldn't have been more than 34. A scar along the left side of his jaw, thin and old. His eyes were grey. Not the interesting grey of winter skies, Flat, functional grey, the colour of slate under overcast. They moved across the room with the quick precision of someone taking inventory, not admiring the view. They landed on Orla. Then they landed on Elara. He went still, not the stillness of someone deciding how to react. The stillness of someone whose body has made a decision several seconds before their brain has caught up. His nostrils flared. The grey eyes went to something that was not grey at all. Or it was, but the way a storm is grey, it from inside, moving. His hands, which had been loose at his sides, curled once and then deliberately uncurled. "Who are you?" he said, not accounting. "Elara Vane. I was the junior archivist at Stonecroft for 6 years." She kept her voice even. "I'm the person who got her out. She's Aldrich's daughter. Yes. Croft is claiming she was taken by a Stonecroft defector who has lost her mind." His voice was level. She could hear the precision in it, the same precision as his eyes. "But she was taken in the night, traumatized, that you are dangerous and delusional, and that Greywood should return both of you immediately for the child's safety." Elara looked at him. Croft's physician was putting something in the children's meals. Orla didn't eat the full dose. I switched her serving, but enough got through that she's been febrile for 3 days. But she needs your healer to identify what it is and counteract it. She paused. "I have documentation, not much. I grabbed what I could reach in 40 minutes. But I have the physician's requisition forms for the past 2 months, and there are compounds listed that have no place in a child's diet. Where is this documentation?" Strapped to my chest under my coat in a waterproof sleeve. Another stillness, different from the first one. "You crossed the Ashford in March," he said. "With a sick child and paper documents you waterproofed. You couldn't leave the documents. They're the only proof that doesn't rely on my word." He looked at her for a long moment. She held the look because she had nothing left to hide behind and she was too tired to try. "Asha is 12 minutes out," Strand said from the corner, very quietly. 10, Cale said, and something in his voice shifted, a layer of command underneath the surface tone that didn't need to be loud to be absolute. "Tell her 10. He crossed the room, toward Elara, toward Orla, and the relief of that was so immediate and physical that Elara felt her shoulders drop without deciding to. He crouched beside the examination table and put 2 fingers against the child's wrist. Orla looked at him with the unimpressed assessment of a 4-year-old evaluating a stranger. "What's your name?" he said to her. Orla? Orla, I'm going to have someone look at you who knows a lot more about fevers than I do. Is that all right?" A pause. Orla looked at Elara. Elara nodded. "Okay," Orla said, with the air of someone granting a substantial concession. The corner of his mouth moved, not quite a smile. The memory of the shape one made. He stood and looked at Elara again. The grey eyes were doing something she could not read. She was used to not being read. She was used to being furniture, background, the woman who filed the records and kept her head down and did not shift and therefore did not count. But she was not used to being looked at this way, as though she was something to be understood rather than categorized. "You should get out of those clothes," he said. "You'll hypothermic before Asher arrives." "I'm fine, you're shaking." "I've been shaking for 6 kilometers. I'm still upright." The almost smile again. "Strand, get her something dry." He looked back at Elara. "While you change, you can tell me what compounds were on the requisition forms," she told him. She changed behind a partition that Strand produced with diplomatic efficiency, and she talked through the thin wall, naming everything she had memorized from those forms in the 2 days, between finding Doyle in the records room and leaving Stonecroft with a child strapped to her back. He asked precise questions, good ones, the kind that told her he was actually listening rather than waiting for her to finish. Asher arrived in 11 minutes. It was not what Elara had pictured from a treaty document. Mid-50s, lean, with the unhurried movements of someone who had learned long ago that panic wasted the first 10 seconds you needed most. She went to Orla without preamble, and the examination that followed was quiet and systematic, and took 23 minutes. Elara stood against the wall and watched and did not breathe properly the entire time. "Compant withdrawal suppressor," Asher said finally, not looking up from her kit. "Low dosage, cumulative." Whoever designed this knew what they were doing. High enough to cause developmental interference over weeks, low enough that you wouldn't see it in a standard health check. She looked up at Cale. If she'd been receiving full doses for another month, we'd be looking at permanent cognitive effects. The sound Cale made was not loud. It was barely sound at all. But every wolf in the room took an involuntary half-step back. "Can you counteract it?" Elara said, "Already started." Asher was loading a syringe with the calm focus of someone who had decided the crisis portion was over and now there was only work. "She'll need 3 treatments over the next week. Fever should break by morning." She looked at Elara for the first time, assessed her the same way she'd assessed Orla, quickly and without judgment. "You should also sit down. You have the early signs of hypothermia, and you're running a temperature. Sit down." Elara sat. She did not mean to cry. She had not cried in years. Not when the pack had watched her fail to shift at 23, and she had stood in the clearing while the verdict settled over everyone's faces. And she had understood that she would never be more than tolerated in a place that measured worth in wolf weight. Not during the 6 hours it had taken to cross the border. But watching Asher work, watching Orla's small chest rise and fall with more steadiness than it had managed in 3 days. The tears came without announcement, quietly, and she let them because she was too exhausted to stop them, and there was no one here whose opinion she was required to manage. Cale sat down across from her. He didn't say anything. He didn't try to fix it or explain it or talk her out of it. He sat in the folding chair with his elbows on his knees, and he was simply present, which was somehow more than she knew what to do with. "She's going to be all right," Asher said from somewhere to Elara's left. Elara nodded. She knew. She had believed it was possible for the last 6 hours, and now it was confirmed, and the difference between possible and confirmed turned out to be where everything she had been holding had been stored. "Croft will file a formal complaint," Cale said. His voice was quiet. Not gentle exactly. She got the feeling that gentle wasn't a frequency he had a lot of practice with, but careful, deliberate. "No, he'll call it kidnapping. I know that too. What I'm going to call it," Cale said, "is evidence of attempted murder of a minor, conspiracy to seize power through the death of a legitimate heir, and violation of the Interpack Covenant on child welfare." He paused. "I'm also going to call it the most well-documented case I've seen in 11 years of sitting on the Border Council, because you walked in here with waterproofed requisition forms." Elara looked at him. "You had 40 minutes to pack, and you spent them on the child and the documents. The child needed to come. The documents were the only way anyone would believe me." He was looking at her again, that same expression she could not read. "Who packed for you?" he said. She blinked. "What? You had 40 minutes. You packed for the child. You secured the evidence. What did you take for yourself?" She thought about the bag on the floor by the partition. One change of clothes. Her identification papers. A photograph of her mother that she had not looked at in 2 years because looking at it made the loneliness too specific. "What I needed," she said. His jaw shifted. She was starting to recognize that movement, the way a decision looked on his face before it became words. "You're not going back," he said. "You don't get to decide that." "No, but I'm asking." The words sat between them. She turned them over. He had been waiting for the angle. The thing that explained why a man this careful had come himself to a border checkpoint in the middle of the night, why he was sitting in a folding chair talking to a wolfless archivist like she was someone worth the time. She could not find the angle. "She needs somewhere stable while she recovers," Elara said finally. "Orla. She doesn't know me well enough to be on her own. And she doesn't know anyone here at all. If I leave, she'll be in my main house with my PAX healer and a child welfare coordinator who has dealt with more complicated situations than this." He held her gaze. "And if you stay, she'll have you, which is clearly what she prefers." Orla had at some point in the last several minutes hooked her small hand into the edge of Elara's sleeve and was holding on with the focused determination of a child who had decided this was her anchor and was not open to renegotiation. Elara looked down at the small fingers, felt the familiar pull, the feeling she had been trying not to feel for 4 days, the one that said this child had become something she was not prepared to lose. "I don't have standing," Elara said. "I'm wolfless. I have no pack. Technically, I'm a defector from an enemy territory." "Technically," Cale said, "you are a material witness to attempted murder and the primary caregiver of a ward of Greywood's protection, which gives you standing I haven't even finished calculating yet." She stared at him. "You decided that very fast." "I decided it when you walked out of the treeline, soaking wet with documentation strapped to your chest." Something shifted in his expression, not the almost smile this time, something rawer. "I don't make decisions slowly when the evidence is clear." She did not know what to say to that. She had not, in 6 years of being furniture in a pack house, developed a vocabulary for being taken seriously. They moved to the main house before dawn. Orla transferred with careful efficiency, Asher walking alongside with her kit, but Cale carrying Orla himself through the last stretch of dark trail where the path wasn't wide enough for the stretcher. Elara watched him hold the child with the same deliberate gentleness she had seen when he'd checked her pulse, the care of a large person who understood that being large meant choosing how you took up space. The main house was nothing like Stonecroft's pack hall. Stonecroft had been institutional, concrete and efficiency, and the permanent smell of floor cleaner and old coffee. This was built from the mountain itself, it seemed, a stone and dark-stained timber, low lighting, the smell of wood smoke and old pine and something baking from somewhere deep in the building. The floors were warm underfoot, actual warm, radiant heat through the stone. Elara stood in the entrance hall and thought, "I have never been in a building that felt like it was built to last." Her own room, a guest room, Strand told her, on the 2nd floor, had a window that looked out onto the forest and a bed with enough blankets that she sat on the edge of it and had to resist the urge to simply fall sideways and not move until spring. She checked on Orla first, in the adjoining room, where Ashar had set up monitoring equipment with the brisk competence of someone accustomed to field medicine. Orla was asleep. Her breathing was easier. The flush in her cheeks was already a shade less alarming. Elara stood at the foot of the child's bed and watched her sleep, and felt something in her chest unlock that she hadn't known was locked. She slept for 11 hours. She woke to the sound of Orla's voice in the next room, talking to someone with the uninhibited commentary of a child who has decided you are worth explaining things to. Elara was vertical and moving before she was fully conscious, one hand on the doorframe, and she looked through the gap to find Orla sitting up in bed with significantly more color than she'd had the previous night, holding court. Cale was in the chair beside the bed. He was holding a wooden figure, a wolf, small, clearly hand-carved, the kind of object produced in quiet hours by someone with a knife and patience. Elara was examining it with the concentrated interest of a child evaluating the quality of a gift, which meant turning it upside down and looking at the bottom. "The ears are uneven," Orla said. "I know," Cale said. "Did you do it on purpose?" "No." "Did you try to fix it?" "Yes." Orla considered this. "Did it get worse when you tried to fix it?" A pause. "Yes, that's what happens when you try to fix ears," Orla said, with the gravity of accumulated wisdom, and handed the wolf back to him. "You should leave them." He took the wolf. He looked at it. He looked at Orla, and he said, with complete seriousness, "I'll remember that." Elara pushed the door open. Both of them looked at her. "You were eavesdropping," Orla said. "I was checking on you. Cale brought me a wolf. The ears are uneven, but I said he should leave them." She paused. "Are we staying?" Elara opened her mouth, looked at Cale, who looked back at her with those slate-grey eyes, and said nothing which was somehow louder than speaking. "For a while," Elara said. "While you're getting better." Orla seemed to find this satisfactory. She lay back against the pillow with the wolf held against her chest, ears up. The days that followed were strange in the way that safety is strange when you have not had it for a long time. She checked Orla twice daily and reported steady improvement. The fever broke on the second morning. Elara sat with Orla through the night, and when the child's temperature finally dropped to normal, she put her head down on the edge of the bed and breathed for the first time in what felt like weeks. Cale kept his distance during those days, was always aware of him. Some part of her brain had apparently decided he was relevant, and was tracking his location in the building with an attention she had not asked for and could not turn off. But he did not hover. He checked in once in the morning and once in the evening, and the visits were brief and practical, and she told herself she did not notice when they weren't. On the fourth day, the Stonecroft delegation arrived. Elara watched from a second-floor corridor as they came through the gate. Croft Voss in the lead. She had seen him twice in person, and in person he was smaller than he seemed in documents, a narrow man with watchful eyes and the permanent expression of someone calculating the distance between where he was and where he wanted to be, two-pack lawyers. And behind them, Doyle, the physician, walked with his hands in his coat pockets and his eyes on the middle distance, the practiced neutrality of a man who expected to be believed because he had always been believed. Cale met them in the hall. Elara found the corridor above with the lattice screen. The route was clearly marked on the building map that Strand had given her, and she told herself she had found it by accident and did not examine that story closely. Croft opened with grief. He was good at it, the voice catching at the right moments, the references to his late brother, the deep and sincere concern for his niece, the child's welfare, the trauma of having been taken in the night. But surely Greywood understood that they only wanted her safely home. Cale let him finish. Then he said, "Your physician, in the 14 weeks before Orla Voss was brought to my territory, requisitioned the following compounds through Stonecroft's medical supply chain." He read from a document, but quickly. Precisely each compound named, and the quantity and the date, and with each one the room got a specific kind of quiet that Elara recognized as the quiet of people recalibrating what they thought they'd walked into. Croft's lawyer started to speak. "I haven't finished," Cale said. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Croft looked, for the first time, uncertain. "Your healer examined the child," Cale continued. "Their assessment, which I have in writing, is that without intervention, Orla Voss would have sustained permanent neurological damage within 4 to 6 weeks. She had, by that point, been receiving modified doses for approximately 6 weeks already." He set the document down. "My question for you, Alpha Croft, is not whether you knew. The question is whether you would like to explain it yourself, or whether you would prefer I present my full findings to the Interpack Council." The silence lasted a long time. Croft said, very carefully, "The girl has clearly influenced your assessment." "The girl," Cale said, "crossed a river in March carrying your niece and waterproofed evidence of your physician's purchasing records. Whatever influence she has on my assessment comes from the quality of her documentation." Doyle, for the first time, looked at the floor. Elara in the corridor pressed her hand flat against the stone wall and breathed. The delegation left within the hour. She watched them go from the window at the end of the hall. Croft walked with his hands in his pockets and his eyes forward, and she had seen that walk before, the walk of a man revising his plan rather than abandoning it. It was not over. She knew that the way she knew the river shallows, the way she knew exits. She found Cale in the courtyard after. He was standing with his hands braced on the stone railing, looking at the tree line. The silver at his temple caught the light. She had the sudden disorienting sense that she was seeing him actually still for the first time. Not the contained stillness of someone managing a room, but the stillness of someone alone with a thought they had not yet decided what to do with. "He'll go to the council," she said. "Yes. He has more resources than I do. More standing, more history with the council members. Also, yes." "So what happens?" Cale turned. Grey eyes in daylight had more depth than she had initially given them credit for. She noticed, not for the first time, and with the same irritation as every previous time, that she was noticing things about him she had not planned to notice. "What happens," he said, "is that I have Orla's medical records, your documentation, and the testimony of my own healer. What Croft has is a story about a delusional wolfless archivist who imagined a conspiracy." He paused. "The council has met me before. They have not met you yet." She stopped. "What?" I was going to say I'm not someone they'll believe, and then I realized that's what I've been trained to say for 6 years. But she looked at him. "I'm actually someone with documented evidence and a living witness whose prognosis validates everything I claimed." Something moved in his expression. Not the almost smile. Something fuller than that, and quicker. "Yes," he said, "that's what you are." She stood beside him at the railing. The forest below was green and still and very old-looking, and the morning light was doing something particular to the snow on the upper ridgeline, making it look less like weather and more like intention. "I don't know how to do this," she said. Not an apology, a statement of fact. "Do what? Stay, accept help, but not be waiting for the point where it costs me something I can't afford to pay." He was quiet for long enough that she thought he wasn't going to answer. "I don't know how to ask for things," he said finally. "I've been running this pack for 11 years and I have never." He stopped. "Started again. Mate bond closed 3 years ago, or what I thought was the bond. She chose someone else and I told myself that was the answer. But some people don't get that." A pause. "I've been wrong before." Elara turned to look at him. He was looking at the tree line. "You're not actually telling me you think I'm your mate," she said. "I'm telling you something happened when you walked out of those trees that has not happened to me in 11 years of standing at borders." He still wasn't looking at her, but she had the strange sense that this was costing him something, the telling of it, that he was not a man who spent words without knowing what they were worth. "But I'm telling you I'm not going to do anything about it without your actual consent, which means I'm telling you at all." She looked at the forest. "I'm wolfless," she said. "I know. That's not, it doesn't make me less of a person. I'm telling you because it's relevant to the mate bond most alphas can't form a true bond with. I know the conventional understanding." He finally turned. The grey eyes were level. "Steady. I'm also aware that the conventional understanding was written by people who had never met a wolfless woman who crossed the Ashfan in March with a 4-year-old and requisition forms." Elara felt something shift in her chest. Not her wolf. She had no wolf. Something else. Something that had been coiled tight for so long she had forgotten it was there. "You should know," she said, "that I don't trust easily, I know, and that I'm going to check every single thing you tell me against observable evidence. Good, and that I will not be managed. If you are making political decisions that involve me or Orla, I want to know." "You'll want to be involved," he said. "Not a question. I'll want to be involved." He nodded once. "Then come to the meeting with the council next Thursday." She blinked. "Just like that. You have the documentation. You have the testimony. You have seen Croft's face when the compounds were named. His jaw was set in the way she had come to recognize as decision made. I don't see a reason to sit you in a corridor with a lattice screen when you could be at the table." She stared at him for a long moment. He stared back. "You knew I was in the corridor," she said, "but I knew before you found the staircase. You didn't say anything. You needed to hear it. The corridor was fine." The almost smile, and this time it went further. Not quite the way she suspected his full smile would go, but further than she had seen. "Next time, there's a chair at the end of the hall with a better sight line. Strand will show you." She did not know what to do with him. She suspected she was going to spend a long time figuring it out, but she was startled to find she did not hate that prospect. Orla was fully alert by the end of the week. Alert, in Orla's case, meant conducting a detailed audit of the main house from her perspective, which involved asking pointed questions of every adult she encountered and arriving at her own conclusions, regardless of the answers provided. Kale's wolf carving had been joined by 2 others, a bear and what Orla insisted was a deer, though the antlers were, Elara thought privately, optimistic. Asher declared the final treatment a success on a Thursday morning. Orla celebrated by attempting to run down the main corridor and sliding approximately 4 meters on the stone floor in her socks. Kale, who had been at the corridor's end, had caught her with one arm without looking up from the document in his other hand. "Shoes," he said. "Socks are faster," Orla said. "Socks are a medical liability." Orla considered this with the seriousness it deserved. What about socks with grips? He looked up at her over the document. "I'll see what we have." "Grey ones," Orla said, "not pink. Pink is too much in the morning." He looked at Elara, who had arrived at the corridor's end slightly out of breath over Orla's head. The look said several things. She was getting better at reading it. The council hearing took place 10 days after the delegation's visit. Elara sat at the table, presented the documents in the order she had planned, answered the questions she had prepared for and several she hadn't, and did not flinch when Croft's representative called her unqualified, unaffiliated, and motivated by personal grievance. "My qualification," she said, when the room let her speak again, "is 6 years of processing every medical, legal, and territorial document that moved through Stonecroft's administrative system. Affiliation is with the child whose life that documentation helped save. And my personal grievance, if we're naming it, is that a 4-year-old girl was being systematically poisoned by someone who assumed no one was paying close enough attention." She put the final document on the table, the physician's last requisition form, waited 3 days before she had left. "I was paying attention," she said. "That's all." The council's ruling came 6 days later. Voss was removed from leadership, pending a full investigation into his late brother's death. Doyle's license was suspended. Stonecroft was placed under temporary council administration until a legitimate Alpha succession could be confirmed. Kale told her in the main hall on a quiet afternoon when Orla was napping, and the building had settled into the particular piece of a place where nothing was immediately on fire. "What happens to her?" Elara said. "That depends in part on Kieran Voss, Aldrich's cousin, who has a legitimate bloodline claim. He's been contacted." He paused. "He asked first whether she was healthy, whether she was happy." Elara looked at her hands. "And I told him she was being cared for by the most meticulous person I had met in my professional life, and that she had strong opinions about sock colors." He let a silence sit. He cried. Elara pressed her lips together. "She needs stability," Elara said. "Whatever happens with the succession." "She can't be. She won't be." He was looking at her with that directness she had stopped trying to deflect. "I have put in a formal request to the council for continued Greywood guardianship through the transition period. Asher is her medical provider of record. You are listed as her primary adult attachment figure." A pause. "That's the formal term, primary adult attachment figure. It means the person she runs to when she slides down a corridor in her socks." His voice did something it did not often do, a slight shift in register, a warmth underneath the precision. "It means the person she told me, specifically, she needed to find before she would let the fever treatment begin. It means you." Elara stood very still. "I don't know how to stay," she said. "Not for the first time." But it was a different sentence now. The first time had been a confession of limitation. This time it was something closer to a question. "You've been staying for 10 days, he said. "You're not bad at it." She laughed. It came out rusty, like something that had not been used in too long, and she heard it and felt strange about it because she could not remember the last time the sound had surprised her. Cale's expression shifted in a way she was not prepared for. His eyes wide for half a second, his jaw loose, and then the almost smile went all the way, and it was, she found, a very good smile. It changed his entire face. "What?" she said. "Nothing." But he was still looking at her the way he sometimes looked at the tree line. "Tell me." "You have a good laugh," he said simply. "I'd like to hear it again." She stood in the main hall of the Greywood pack house, with 10 days of not quite safety settling into something that felt closer to the real thing, and she looked at the man who had sent a patrol checkpoint, running for his healer and his best chair, and waterproofed her documents at 3 a.m. when she had walked out of the dark with nothing but a sick child and the truth. "Ask me something funny," she said, his brow lifted. The almost law was collecting them now, cataloguing the different shapes his face made when he forgot he was a person who did not make them. "I'll work on it," he said. Outside, the snow had started again. The quiet kind, the kind that settled into the pines and stilled the whole mountain, and made the world feel, just briefly, like it had agreed to hold still. Ella's voice drifted from somewhere down the hall, interrogating someone about the gripped socks, decisive and unhurried, entirely certain she would get what she asked for. She probably would. Elara had started to understand that this was a place where children were not inconveniences to be managed, where the adults who showed up for them, regardless of how they arrived, were given a chair at the table and a lattice-free view. She reached out her hand. Cale looked at it, then at her, took it, careful and exact, the way he did most things. Like the act of choosing mattered as much as the choice. Outside, the snow kept falling, steady and unhurried, covering the mountain in something that was not silence, but close enough to rest in.